We are recording the interview of John Parise. This interview is being conducted by Jeremy Tack from the Wright State University's Veteran Voices Project. This interview is being recorded at the Springboro Municipal Building. It is 12:15 on the 13th of November, 2017. John, thank you for doing this interview with me.
You're welcome.
Let's start off with where and when were you born?
Chicago, Illinois.
Chicago, Illinois. And then when were you born?
May 7th, 1947.
Who were your parents and what were their occupations?
My mother was a homemaker, and my father was a foreman at Mogan David Wine in Chicago. I'm not even sure they're still in existence.
Do you have any siblings?
Yes, I have 3 brothers. One is deceased.
Did any of your family members serve in the military?
My older brother did, but other than that, no one else in the family.
So what branch of the military did you serve in?
At the Marine Corps.
Marine Corps. Awesome. So tell me what you did before the Marine Corps.
I was in college because that's what you did after you graduated high school, was living at home. And I didn't really like college. And at that time, the draft was going on, and I was just getting by with C averages, maybe C minus. And after one semester, I decided, I can't work like this with the pressure of the draft over my head. And I said, who am I kidding? I don't even know what I want to do with my life. So I decided to quit college and call the draft board. And I did this all without my father's permission, but I was of legal age, there was nothing he could do. I called the draft board, and this was in January of '66. I asked them to push up my draft number, that I was ready to go. And they came back and said, well, we can't take it till May. And I said, well, that can't be. I haven't told my father I quit college yet. I can't wait 5 months at home. And he said, well, you could always enlist. Well, that kind of got me upset. I said, well, if I'm not good enough for you people to take as a draftee, I'm certainly not going to enlist for 3 years in the Army. I used more colorful metaphors, so we'll leave that out. So I went down the checklist. The Air Force was good, but I didn't want to be out of circulation for 4 years. The Navy, I ruled them out immediately. I couldn't swim, and I hated the uniforms. I hate bell bottoms. So that left one thing left, the Marine Corps, and they more than welcomed me with open arms. So I enlisted in the Marine Corps for 3 years.
And this was 1966?
1966.
So what did your parents think about
that? My dad had recently remarried because my mother had died in a car accident a few years before. My dad's old country Italian as far as his personality. He didn't like it too much, but there was nothing he could do. And the night before I had to go down to the induction center, he was the one that got drunk. You would have thought it would have been me. But it was he got drunk, and he just accepted it. There was nothing he could do.
So you went off to boot camp.
Yes.
Tell me about boot camp.
Boot camp was quite a wake-up call. We flew from Chicago to San Diego, that boot camp. They call those Hollywood Marines out there. It was just as tough. I don't care what anybody from Paris Island tells you. So we get off the plane, we get on this bus, we go to the Marine Corps depot, and then some crazy whacked-out sergeant got on the bus and just started screaming at the top of his lungs. Couldn't understand what the hell's wrong with this guy. Well, I think it was terror tactics, just to scare the crap out of us, and it worked. So like a herd of cattle, we all got off the bus and we stood on these yellow footprints they had painted us. So you could kind of get an idea of what was going on. Everything was kind of a blur after that. We each got our something like 15-second haircut, which was, it's like shearing sheep. We were given boxes to put all our civilian belongings into and ship it home. We were all given one phone call to let our folks know that we arrived at boot camp safely. And then we were outfitted with uniforms that half-assed didn't fit. These blazing yellow sweatshirts, bald head. You couldn't go over the fence, AWOL. You'd be spotted immediately. I think they did that on purpose. And they gave us about 4 hours sleep because we landed in San Diego about 2 in the morning or something like that. But we didn't get to sleep until 6. They got us up at 4. Again, another shock. What the hell is this? I've only had 2 hours sleep. So they rustled us up and marched us as much as civilians could be marched to the mess hall. And we were given 5 minutes to eat, and you couldn't talk. Well, we were given, among other things, bacon that was just thawed out. It wasn't even cooked. I said, geez, I'm going to get worms from this. You progressed after that. Every night you were afraid to go to sleep for fear. When they woke you up, they came in with empty trash cans, banging them on the side. There was nothing pleasant about it. But after about 3 or 4 weeks of boot camp, you kind of got used to it. And you were awake before it happened, so it was no shock. And you slowly just kind of got used to it. It wasn't really that bad after the first 4 weeks.
Do you have any instructors that you remember specifically?
Oh, yeah, a couple of them. Sergeant Lowry, he was our senior drill instructor. He was a hard man, but he was very fair, and he never laid a hand on you. He left that to his junior DIs. I believe there were 3 DIs assigned to each platoon, the senior and then 2 juniors. Well, the 2 juniors did all the dirty work. They knocked you around when it was appropriate. And one of them was rumored to have weekly appointments at Building 5. Well, out in San Diego, Building 5 was known as the psych ward. And, you know, I kind of believed that after a while, because one Sunday morning we're sitting around on our foot lockers outside, polishing our shoes, doing odds and ends. It was kind of as much as the Marine Corps could call it, a relaxation day. Well, then suddenly this DI just flipped out and he grabbed the platoon colors, if you would, which had a pointed spear at the end. And he puts it down in the charging position and charges after one of the recruits, and he nailed him between the arm and his chest right into the door of the Quonset hut. Well, he was a black guy, and I swear to God he turned white. So they always kept you on edge, and you didn't fool around. I got knocked around a couple times because I called one of them a ewe. A ewe, according to them, was a female sheep. Everything was sir this, sir that, but sometimes it just slipped out. It was you. Well, they didn't give me any crap at that time because we were out on the firing range, and we had live ammo. I never thought junior DIs could get polite, but when you had live ammo, they were polite. But as soon as we turned in our weapons and got back to the barracks, there was a little punching bag routine in the shower room. It really wasn't that bad. I just went with the flow. Yeah. One thing they don't like are crybabies or snitches. You suck it up and go on. It's the Marine Corps, not the Boy Scouts.
So after boot camp, what was the next step for you?
Next step was advanced infantry training. Right after that, we were shipped off from San Diego to Camp Lejeune, which was, I don't know, 100 miles, 150 miles farther north. Another rat hole. It was nothing but hills, dried. You could have been in the Mojave Desert. It stunk. All Marine Corps bases stink. I don't care what anyone tells you. There's no such thing as a good Marine Corps base. It was the crap on the East Coast, crap on the West Coast, and everything overseas was crap. So anyway, at camp, that's when we learned to throw hand grenades, to fire heavier weapons, go on forced marches. And this was during the summer months, and we lost 3 members of our platoon because there was a prairie fire. All the instructors were told not to fire grenades because of the dry grass. Well, one of them did, and it started a huge prairie fire, and 3 Marines were burned to death putting the fire out. So we weren't even overseas, and we had 3 casualties. And at the end of that, we were given a 30-day leave, because from then we went on to our specialties, whatever we were assigned to. And the specialties were decided 2 weeks into boot camp, where everyone had to take some kind of a test. I just assumed I was going to be a grunt. You know, that's what the Marine Corps do.
Yeah.
So, but I was just out of college, so I just did this stuff real well. And I was put in teletype. I wasn't a grunt. I don't even know what teletype is. I couldn't type. But anyway, after that advanced infantry training, I got sick the last week there. They gave me, the corpsman gave me a couple bottles of this orangey-looking cough medicine. Well, when I got home, I was on death's doorstep. My folks took me to my private family doctor. I had strep throat. So I spent 2 weeks in bed. Well, the 3rd week, I'm starting to feel a little bit better. And so I just went into the kitchen and heated up some tea to help with the sore throat. Well, my dad brought home sample bottles from Mogan David wine. So I said, oh, shit, you know, I'll just heat up the wine with the tea.
Yeah.
And it progressed from there. After a while, I said, screw the tea, I'll just heat up the wine. And after that, I said, screw heating it up, just crack the bottle open and give it to me. Well, about that time, I was, getting pretty much shit-faced. Well, my friend came over to see how I was. He said, well, let's go out and party or something. And I was feeling no pain. I said, sure, why not? So we went to the liquor store and got a bottle of Southern Comfort. This was whiskey. Well, let me tell you, wine and whiskey don't mix. I got sicker than a dog that day and regretted that ever since. I never mixed my booze, and from that point on, I could never drink whiskey. Just the smell of it would make me gag. I drink vodka, but that's a whole different animal. So that's pretty much how so I only had a good week and a half 30-day leave. I mean, because the rest of the time I was just kind of laid up. And from that point, I had to report back to San Diego, where the electronics school started. So there was a couple of months of electronics school.
How was that school?
Yeah, it was a piece of cake. You know, and you were no longer a boot. You had nobody browbeating you. You didn't have DI, so to speak. You had section senior NCOs that told you what to do, but it was a piece of cake compared to boot camp. So it was, and I actually put on a few pounds, and that scared the crap out of me because my folks came out to visit me. Oh, that was another good story. We're out on break in San Diego between classes, and there's roads going by, and a car drives by, and I said, damn, that looks like my dad's car. He had a '66 Buick Electra, mint green with a black vinyl top. It was a beautiful car. And I said, boy, that looks like my dad's car. We go back in class. About 20 minutes later, somebody comes in to talk to the instructor, and he says, Parise, come on out in the hall. And I said, shit, I didn't do anything. What the hell is this all about? And it's my old man. I said, oh, it was just a shock to see my old man out there. Because he drove all the way out there from Chicago out to San Diego. They were on vacation in Colorado, and they decided on a whim, what the hell, let's travel a little farther and see John. So my little brother and his friend was with him, along with my stepmom and my dad. So he gave me the rest of the weekend off. Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. And they took pictures, and then later on when he sent me pictures back, it's, God, I got to do something about this. So I started jogging 3 miles a day. I didn't have to do that, but I wasn't about to become, there's no such thing as a fat Marine, unless you're a lifer and you're stateside for the rest of your life. And I used to do jumping jacks in the shower, and I had nothing but hot water. It was like a sauna in there. I was determined to lose that weight, because every morning at breakfast you could eat whatever the hell you wanted, pancakes and crap like that, and I did. But before you know it, stuff catches up with you. So that was pretty much the advanced training as far as electronics, and from there, it's kind of vague. It gets confused. I think we got another 30-day leave or something like that, and from that point on, we were assigned overseas.
And was that Vietnam?
No, originally it was Okinawa.
Okay.
Okay, and it was our entire class, electronics class, that went to Okinawa. So we were pretty much stationed in the same billets, if you wanted. I don't know if they call that in the Marine Corps, but it was in the same group. Ran into a friend, made a friend, Roger Wilson. He was from Chicago, and we became friends. He wasn't, I don't know how we got to meet. It must have been at the NCO club, because he wasn't part of, he was originally assigned motor pool, and then switched to communications. And the odd thing about it, the mystery of the military, they had just finished sending him to Vietnam language school. He knew the language, and here he is sitting behind a typewriter. And he was upset about it. He was a very patriotic guy. He says, they taught me to do this, and here I am on Okinawa. What the hell is this all about? So he wrote a letter to his state senator. At that time, it was Senator Dirksen. And Senator Dirksen out of Illinois was a very popular and powerful senator. Well, one thing you learn in the military, politics and the military do not mix. He got his marching orders within 2 weeks of sending that letter off to his senator. And I told him I was going to miss him. I said, man alive. Well, about 2-3 weeks later, I'm getting to thinking about it. I said, hell with this, I'm going too. So I put in transfer orders, asked for a transfer, and so did a number of us. Yeah, we want to go. So we did. We got there. He was assigned to a recon unit. So I was assigned to the 3rd Marine, 26th Marine, 3rd Battalion, 26th Marine Regiment. And so most of them stayed at division headquarters in Phu. It was a big base. But I was assigned to this forward unit. And as I'm getting my gear, weapons and everything else at the supply tent, the supply sergeant's laughing his butt off. And I says, what's so funny? He said, son, you're going to where the gooks are real. Well, exactly like the sound of that. So they put me on a helicopter, and they flew me up to a base called Quezon. I don't know if you're familiar with Quezon.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, well, it was a real rat hole. And even as a newbie, when I got off the helicopter, I looked around and I said, who the hell decided to put a base here? We were surrounded by mountains on 3 sides, and one side was a plateau, but it was almost like shooting fish in a barrel. It was so crummy, they had to put companies of Marines on these hills to protect us from them taking the hills and lobbing shells into our base. I come to find out after the war that base was put there as bait. It was put there to lure the NVA out into an open battle. I didn't know that till after I was out of the service and read it in a book. So anyway, Quezon, yeah, you want to talk about a cultural shock. Your home was a hole in the ground. You dug a hole because they had no hooches at Quezon. They had a couple buildings, but they were for the mess hall and for the showers. Everything else was underground. Well, for a couple nights, I had to sleep on top of sandbags because I couldn't dig a hole deep enough. And by the time the hole was dug deep enough, the unit packed up and moved. I was kind of grateful for that because I hadn't like sleeping in a hole. It wasn't my idea of being in the Marine Corps. Well, we moved around a lot up in I Corps. Vietnam was broken into sections of the area. I Corps was farthest north, and I think it's I-4, that's what they call it, was furthest south around Saigon. Well, I Corps was up north where I think the real action was. I'm being prejudiced. I'm sure the Army will think differently. But Quezon, Dong Ha, Camp Carroll, Con Thien, those places were close to the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. So it was thick as flies up there. Well, funny thing about it at Quezon, here I am a teletype operator. There's no such thing as teletype at Quezon. So, all right, and no teletype. What the hell am I supposed to do? He said, well, I was assigned to perimeter guard duty at night. I ran convoy security, and I was a message runner when the lines were down. My first night, which was the second night there at Quezon, I was assigned to perimeter guard duty. Here I am sitting on top of this bunker with an M50 machine gun and 2 Claymore mine triggers on either side of me. And I thought, I've never seen this much firepower since I was back in the States. Well, the line officer comes by just before dusk, and he says, I don't know if he knew I was a newbie or not. He said, I don't care how many rounds you fire or how many claymores you set off, but I better see some dead bodies in the wire come morning. Well, out there, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. The camp was totally blacked out at night. I mean, it's hard to imagine. I'm black. I'm telling you, you couldn't see your hand. So I'm sitting there with my hands on the trigger of the M50, and I'm imagining things. You stare long enough and hard enough, you think you're going to see something. But at the same time, I was so fearful of firing off rounds and find out there was maybe a monkey in the wire instead of an enemy soldier. Well, thank God nothing happened that night. And then they switch around. Another time I was somewhere else where I was just in a foxhole with sandbags and my M16. They put a couple guys with you because you transfer off every 4 hours, so you'd stay awake. And at night, because you're working during the day anyway, and then you get night, it's hard to stay awake. You know, a couple of times I could feel myself nodding off. Thank God nothing happened, but the nighttime was the scariest time. I didn't have so much a problem during the day, but nighttime just literally scared the crap out of me. It wasn't a couple, and my hole, in all my infinite wisdom, the hole I dug for a home wasn't 30 yards from an artillery battery of 150 howitzers. Well, after a while, my ears started ringing. You can't help it. That's noise inflicted damage. And so one day, I'm walking down one of the paths on the base, and people are scurrying about. I said, what the hell's going on here? Well, then somebody jumps out of a foxhole and knocks me over and drags me into a hall. I said, what the hell are you doing? He said, didn't you hear the incoming alarm? There's incoming. I didn't hear it. Well, then I was brought before my company commander. He says, Parise, you okay? I says, yeah. He says, you haven't been making friends here. He says, well, nobody wants to make friends with me because I got less time than some of them who have been here from the start. And nobody, I come to find out as I became more of a salt, so to speak, that you didn't really want to make friends with new guys because they were the ones that tended to die first because they didn't know what they were doing. So I said, well, I don't know. A lot of guys don't like me. It's not because I'm not trying to make friends. It's because they're angry at me because I got less time than some of them who have already been here before me. And he says, well, what's this I hear about you just walking down a path and not getting into a hole? I said, I didn't hear it. So he sent me off. He sent me on a plane down to Cam Bay. That was south of Da Nang. That's where a Navy base was at. And they had a hospital ship right offshore. So I went there to see an air doctor. And they did hear tests and all that. And they said, yeah, you got hearing loss, and sent me back to my unit. I'm just kind of chuckling here. Well, I could have told you that. What's the point? It was like Thanksgiving, though, while at Cam Bay. I was down there for 3 days and gained 5 pounds because the Navy cooks were cooking. And I'll tell you, there's no finer cooks in the military than the Navy. Every meal was like a Thanksgiving meal. Put on 5 pounds in 3 days, lost that 5 pounds in 7 days when I got back. Sometimes we wondered who the enemy was, our cooks or the cooks. Did you ever have beef liver that had green scales on it? I did. I thought it was a fish at first. They said, no, it's beef liver. I said, no thanks.
Did you communicate with your friends or family back home at all?
When I was on R&R a couple months later in Thailand, I called home, but the time difference was so screwed up. It was almost kind of an afterthought. You know, they didn't really appreciate it. You know, they were happy, but at the same time, they were half asleep. I'm not a good letter writer, and after a while, my company commander got a notice from the Red Cross saying, Parise, our folks are worried about you. You haven't written home. I said, well, you don't have a whole lot to say. He said, you're going to write a letter to your folks. And I did, and I had to show it to the company commander who mailed it to make sure I wrote the letter. So, yeah, as much as that goes. I got a bigger thrill out of contacting a neighborhood friend who was stationed in Saigon. That's almost clear across the entire length of the country, and it was all landline with the hand crank radios. You went from one station to another who plugged you into another. I thought it was a modern feat of science. I was real proud of myself making the effort, and I got all the way down there, and he answered the phone, and we shot the shit there for a few minutes. It was great. It was great to talk to somebody from home like that. We're still friends today. He made it out too. So
that's awesome. So how was the rest of your time at that camp?
We moved around. We never seemed to stay in one place too long. Originally it was at Quezon. Then we moved to Camp Carroll. You could almost call it almost parallel from east to west. Quezon was the farthest west, close to the Cambodian border, or the Laotian border, whatever. Camp Carroll was next, kind of in the middle. And then Dong Ha was the farthest east, closer, but not that close, to, I don't know what the sea is, the Gulf of Tonkin or whatever that body of water is. And then farther north was Cantien, which was a terrible place to be. People died a lot there because they were within firing range of the NVA guns from the other side of the DMZ. And on one convoy duty thing, a bunch of trucks had to go up north to pick up Marines, that the grunts that were pounding around. I got up to that area, and I'll never forget it the rest of my life. It was like being on the face of the moon. No vegetation, wasn't even a weed, nothing but miles and miles of mud and crater holes. I've never seen anything like it before in my life, and never have since. That's something that just stands out in my mind. Brought them back to Dong Ha, and Dong Ha used to get shelled occasionally. It's kind of humorous. The closest I came to getting a Purple Heart at night, the alarm went off, we were getting incoming again. I ran out of the tent to jump into a trench, but I ran into a tent pole and almost choked myself. I didn't put in for a Purple Heart. It was so ridiculous. But I've been lucky. I never got wounded. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. And the crap hit the fan after I left. I work in communication, so a lot of intel came across our section. And I'm reading some of the stuff at Camp Carroll. That's when we moved back west again. And it says that there's a heavy buildup of NVA around the border, heavier than usual. And I had just extended for 6 months. I figure because when you came back stateside, people they'd get petty with you about shining your shoes and this crap and that crap. And I decided, well, the less time I spend stateside, the sooner I'll get out with life. So I extended. Well, then when I'm seeing this damn paperwork coming across, heavy buildup, I wasn't so brave after that. I managed to cancel my extension, and it was a good thing because 3 weeks after I left, Tet hit. So I was lucky to get out of that situation. On the other hand, I feel some survivor's guilt because while I was home, I'm from the Chicagoland area, and at that time the major newspapers had daily casualty lists in the paper. And I'm looking at it. Here all of a sudden I see this name, Roger Wilson. Roger Wilson was my buddy, the Vietnamese guy, the guy who knew the Vietnamese language. But they had him listed from Elgin, Illinois. That's where he was from. It's a suburb of Chicago. But they had him listed as U.S. Army. I thought, oh God, I hope this isn't a typo. I called the paper. It was a typo. It was Roger. I ended up going to his funeral while I was still home on leave, and he was only 3 weeks behind me in coming home. And I met his folks at the funeral, and they invited me home because the Marine escorting the body was just somebody assigned to do that. It wasn't anyone personal, but I knew him, and they were so distraught. They invited me home for dinner and wanted to know everything I could tell them about Roger. It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And to this day, I feel guilty about that. And so that's why I don't know if you call it shortchange it, but I don't give myself a lot of credit for being there. Had I stayed there, yeah. But I'm almost convinced I probably would have died there because I went to my first reunion of my unit in 2014. I only knew 2 people there. And I was asking one of my buddies, well, how did it go? There were a number of them that died that were perimeter people. They weren't grunts. They died inside the unit because at that time it was a 77-day siege at Quezon, and they were constantly getting pounded. It got so bad where they had to parachute supplies in because the North Vietnamese kept shelling the runways and tearing them up. I didn't see that, but I'm convinced it would have died. But I've always been a glass empty type person. I've never been positive. If something bad could happen, it's going to happen. You know, that was my mindset over there. I'm proud I volunteered. I'd probably be a little proud of myself if I didn't cancel that extension. Feel a little bit like a coward for that. It's something I just got to live with the rest of my life. So,
how does your family feel about you coming back home?
They were glad to see me home, but it didn't take long where it was business as usual. I got home. They didn't. No one took me to the airport, and no one picked me up. But I didn't know exactly when I was coming home anyway. Turned out it was the day after Christmas. I finally got home. It was kind of a shock. I stood there in front of the house with my sea bag, just sitting there on the sidewalk, just kind of staring at the house. Then I rang the doorbell, and there was my stepmother, and I didn't show any affection towards her. I wasn't mean or anything. I was just there. And then my stepmom had me call my dad, who was at work, and my dad came home. Of course, he was glad to see me. I said, can I take a bath? I haven't had a real bath in a year. We've had showers, but I sat in that bathtub for an hour. All I was missing was my rubber ducky. It just felt so good to sit down. And my dad had to knock on the bathroom door to make sure I was all right. I say, I'm all right, okay, I'll be getting out. Well, then he come to find out that I didn't hug my stepmother when I got there. My mother had only been dead a couple of years. You know, it's a tough transition. You just can't jump into loving someone like that. That plus the fact I've been gone. And my dad and I, at the dinner table, my first night home, got into an argument. He started raising hell like I was still in high school. I pushed my plate away. I stood up and I said, I don't need this shit anymore. I paid my dues and walked out. He couldn't believe it because I had never talked back to my father before. But I did that night, and I felt strongly about that. I said, I don't need this. I'm not your high school son anymore. Well, later that night, he gave me the keys to his car, and I went out drinking with a couple of buddies. I didn't get smashed because I had my dad's car, but I thought to myself, some things never change. He was proud of me. He had what the blue star thing you hang in the windows. Thank God it never had to be a gold star because that means the person had died. You hear about about veterans being spit on, swore at. That never happened to me. Our neighborhood, veterans were gold. You touched them, you die. I mean, I was from the south side of Chicago. You did not miss. They were very patriotic people, but you hear about this stuff. But I never had that situation happen to me. I don't know what I would have done if somebody had tried that. I didn't need much of an excuse to get angry because it took me about a month to start acting normal. Inadvertently, I'd swear at the dinner table because you're living among animals. You all talk that way back then. And then one evening, I answered the phone because I was the closest one to the phone. We all had landlines back there. There's no such thing as cell phones and that crap. I picked it up and said, 1-1. And my folks looked at me. That was our unit's call number. And just out of force of habit, you answer it by our call unit's number. And that was kind of a chuckle. I felt a little embarrassed about that more than anything. And then one of my buddies who was from the Milwaukee area asked me to call his mom to tell her he was okay, so I took his number down. And he told me to call collect, so I did, and an operator interrupted, who was taking the information down, says, "Is this John?" And I said, "Yeah, who's this?" "This is Debbie. This is a girl I had a crush on from high school. Can you believe that? What are the chances of that happening?" And I said, yeah. And she said, "Well, I'm glad you're home safe, blah, blah, blah." She finished the call, but that was the last contact. But I thought, wow, something that, what are the odds? I could have picked a different evening, a different time, and would have got a different operator, but it was her. Yeah, that's kind of a fond memory. And then after it was later the following week that I heard about Roger dying. After coming home, I changed out of my uniform. I went down to the basement. We had a rec room kind of set up in the basement. I was just laying down there on the sofa, and my older brother Don, who was still in college at the time, came in and says, "What's wrong?" I says, I don't know if I could finish the last year in service. I'm so depressed. After the death, and it just came over me like a cloud. And he took me, bless his heart. I was ill when I came back. My abdomen kept hurting. I'd double over sometimes. He says, "Get in the car, I'm taking it to Great Lakes." I'm from Chicago. There was a Navy hospital up there. A Navy doctor looked me over and says, "Yeah, you got a hernia. Get it done at your next duty station." I thought to myself, you prick. I got to wait another 2 weeks and double over. I could get it done at my next duty station? Well, that's what I ended up doing. But my older brother was like that. He took care of me. I mean, he didn't have to do that, but he did. He drove me up there. So I got to my next duty station, which was another crappy base, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. A couple weeks after that, I had my surgery. And then I got emergency leave because I was useless. I was on no duty. I couldn't do anything. So I went home for another couple of weeks. got back. I think it was a few months after that I developed an ear problem where I had water behind my ear. It kept gurgling. So I think some of this all went back to the war. I don't know. So I told my company sergeant I needed to go to the hospital because corpsmen don't know what to do with ear infections. They'll give you a bottle of cough medicine like they always do. And he said, nah, you don't need that. You're malingering, this and that. I said, if you don't give it to me, I'm going to request mass. That is your opportunity to jump over someone's rank to go to the next higher authority. And it was within your right. Well, he hemmed and hawed, and he finally said, all right, go to hell, get your ass to the hospital. Well, I had an ear doctor look at me. Sure enough, there was water behind my eardrum, and they had to do it twice the rest of the time I was in there. They had to puncture my eardrum to get behind there and put a tube in it so the fluid would drain. That's not a pleasant experience. Yeah, I mean, he almost passed out. He had to give me smelling salts, but and from that point on, I just made it the rest of my tour. Things were getting dicey back stateside then. That's when there were, I think it was sometime after Martin Luther King was assassinated. There was civil unrest, or talk about riots and that. They started training us for riot duty. Yeah, because I remember I had a buddy of mine take a picture of me with a gas mask on, helmet, no T-shirt on, holding my M14. Like, okay, let's do this. Yeah. But it turns out we never got called up for that. Now I'm kind of glad. It's one thing to work against the enemy, but against your own people. But and then I made it out. That's pretty much the story of my life.
What was it like adjusting back to civilian life?
It wasn't bad. I didn't have a job, didn't have a car. I didn't know what I was going to do for a couple of weeks, and then my old man, being from the old country, he says, you better get your ass out there and get a job because you're not living here free. Thanks, Dad. So ultimately, my cousin was married to a service manager of a copier company, and I wanted to know if I needed a job. I said, I don't know anything about copiers. He said, it comes with a company car. I said, okay. And the company car was a Volkswagen Beetle. And I didn't know how to drive stick. I learned on the way home. And it was 25 miles from the office to my home, and when I had to stop on an upgrade, I just prayed the person behind me wasn't too close. Adjusting to civilian life wasn't bad. Wasn't bad. I'm glad I served. It's the proudest days of my life. And I'd probably do it again, but I'd probably do things a little differently. And like I said, I had no control over what they told me my MOS was going to be, and that's what it turned out to be. I think mostly back upon it fondly. I know several veterans that have got PTSD. I don't have that. I didn't see enough bad stuff for that to take effect, and I don't like the stereotype of a lot of people, not all, but a lot of people saying, every Vietnam veteran's a loony, he's crazy. Well, that isn't so. That isn't so at all. The worst nightmare I had one night was having a nightmare, hiding from the NVA under a bunch of shrubs and bushes, and having one of them poke me in the foot with a bayonet. Well, that was a nightmare. I woke up, what it was, my foot was caught in a cord on the electric blanket. Needless to say, I stopped sleeping with electric blankets. But other than that, sometimes I have a nightmare, not a tremendous nightmare, but I wake up and I'm 45 years old and I'm still in the Corps.
Mm-hmm.
I go back to the company clerk and I said, I shouldn't be here. I should have been gone 20 years ago. Oh, we've lost your paperwork. Yeah, silly stuff like that. So.
Are you involved in any veterans organizations?
No. I kind of keep to myself. I'll talk to veterans. We'll shoot the crap, but that's part of my past now.
Any reunions?
I went to my only reunion of the 326, and I just came upon it by accident online through a chat room. It was in Ennis, Montana in 2014. Yeah, I did go. And that was the first time I'd flown since before 9/11. That's, and I decided I was going to treat myself and fly first class. I'll spend the extra bucks. Because when I came back from Vietnam, I promised myself if I survived, I was going to fly home first class. So from San Francisco to Chicago, where I lived, the price of a first class seat was $125. Can you believe that? You can't even get your luggage checked in nowadays for that.
True, yeah.
And the seats back then, I mean to tell you, they were big first class seats. And I was treated like royalty. The stewardesses, well, even back then the stewardesses were a lot better looking than they are now. They sat by my side when things weren't busy, had all the drinks I wanted, and they treated me like royalty. It was a very pleasant trip home. But anyway, getting back to this trip, going back, I get in my first class seat, and I said, I don't know, I'm not as thin as I used to be, but I swear these seats aren't as big. The guy said, you're right, they're not. When's the last time you flew? And I told him, there you go. They make the first class seats smaller now. Yeah. But I did it. So anyway, out at this reunion, I ran into my buddy. As a matter of fact, I told him about it. I emailed him, and he decided he was going to go. This is the guy that asked me to call his mom when he got home. And he said, my mom doesn't, he was kind of joking with me. He said, my mom doesn't believe you. I said, what? He said, you called her and told her I was safe. And I said, how the hell did I know 3 weeks later the shit was going to hit the fan? And he says, I'm just joking. Ran into him and my company commander, only because I didn't recognize him by face, but someone mentioned his name. So I walked up to him and introduced myself to him. It was a great get-together. Even those that didn't know each other, there were about 200 of us in that group. I probably palled around with 5 or 6 of them. We all just swapped stories and stuff like that. Of course, it depended upon what section of the unit you were in. Some were grunts, some were perimeter people. Not everybody. They say every Marine's a grunt, a rifleman. Yeah, I hope I never have to have that happen where they get close enough where I got to do it. The closest I came to that was, again, I'm reverting back to Quezon, when they were dropping supplies by parachute. Well, some of these supplies landed outside the perimeter. So everybody, line cooks, everybody had to line up the trenches with their weapons to cover the guys that had to go out to retrieve the supplies. That's pretty much the closest I came to doing anything like that. Hell, my weapon misfired the first time I fired it. I didn't get a magazine out and the damn thing jammed. This was back when they were having trouble with the newer M16s or the ammo. It was a combination of 2 of them. They were crappy weapons. I qualified expert with an M14. And that was one beautiful weapon. Well, I'd love to have one now, even though I wouldn't use it to hunt. But it just felt perfect. It was almost like it was tailor-made for you. Because I remember with the M14, you could adjust your sights. With the M16, you didn't have to fart around with that thing. Hell, no, whole platoon of NVA could get away from you before you got that damn thing sighted in. And back then, you didn't sight things in. You just sprayed the area and hope you hit something. That's pretty much how that went. So, okay, that was the reunion I went to. It was nice. It was good. They had another one a couple of years ago, but it was in San Diego. And I said, they keep getting farther and farther away. I said, well, I'll wait till they come a little bit closer, and we'll go to them. And my buddy said, yeah, keep me in touch. But as you get older, there's fewer of us, and I guess it's just part of life.
Well, wrapping things up here, let's. Do you have a message or anything you'd like to say to future generations that might be viewing this interview?
Stand tall, be proud. America's a great nation. Don't let anyone discourage you.
Good words. Is there anything you'd like to add that we haven't covered?
I'm sure there probably would be after this meeting's over. It's always that way. I was a little nervous coming into this because after your boss, Jennifer,
yes.
contacted me through, I don't know, it wasn't Facebook, it was a neighborhood talk site. She kind of caught me off guard. She said, well, I know you because you and Mike Hemmert were having these donut days for veterans across the street. And I said, yeah, okay. And then I thought about it the next month. I said, oh, I don't know. There's so many other military people that have done more than I had that deserved it more than me. And I tried to tell her that. I said, I'm no Audie Murphy. I mean, I didn't win any Bronze Stars. I didn't get a Purple Heart. I served, but, I was just an average veteran. That's all. And she says, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But I do appreciate the opportunity. I do.
We appreciate it, too. Thank you so much. And thank you for your service.
Thank you.
That concludes the interview of John Parise.